À Baobab, nous avons pu réaménager notre entreprise cette année-ci, avoir de nouveaux matériels et revoir les conditions de travail de nos employés.
Baobab Sénégal, c'est une structure de microfinance. Notre mission, c'est de servir les populations sénégalaises qui ont des difficultés d'accès à la banque classique ou qui sont mal servies par les banques classiques.
Hello everyone. Welcome to the Plenary of the European Microfinance Week. Thank you very much for being here. Competition with planes and trains is tough, and we do realize we're the only thing standing before you, and some drinks as well, and going to the Christmas market. But let's wrap up in a reflectful way. I'd like to thank the organizers as well for this fantastic Microfinance Week, very thought-provoking and insightful, and I hope we can capture all that in our conversation today. The plan for this session is to make it very dynamic. We want you to participate. We want online participants to participate. We'll have polls and everything that Daniel has prepared for the occasion. And the way we're going to run the session is we're going to ask three questions to our speakers today, and they're going to give brief replies, and then we'll have about 20 minutes for the audience. We'll open the floor, and you can ask whatever you want to our fantastic lineup of speakers. So without further ado, I'll start introducing them, though at this stage we all know who they are. But here I've got Yannick Milev. He's the CEO of Chamroeun Microfinance in Cambodia. To his left we have Sophie Sirtaine. She's CGAP CEO, for those who don't know yet. And then we have Professor Marc Labie. He is the Vice Chancellor, a Professor of Economics and Business Management at the University of Mons. So welcome to the three of you. Thank you for being here. And I'll start with the questions. So the first question is, looking back at the 3 last years in the sector, what are you most proud of? What is the sector's greatest success, do you think? So I'll start with Sophie, please. What do you think?
And I want to start with something that I'm proud of, but that I hope everyone in this room is also proud of, and that we can celebrate indeed as a sector, which is fundamentally the notable progress that we have witnessed in financial inclusion over the last 3 years. And it may sound very basic, but I really think we actually need to celebrate that and recognize that that has not happened without our contribution. So first, to put it in perspective, of course, we've heard from the very beginning for the first session that the Findex data that all of you know by now have shown that access to financial accounts since the last edition in 2017 has increased from 63% to 71%. So if we think about what that means that 3 people out of 4 on the planet have actually access to a financial account. That's not insignificant at all. And what's different from the previous period of progress is that that has actually happened in dozens of countries. The previous editions showed progress, but mainly driven by China and India. We also see from the same data that it's not just accounts that have increased, accounts ownership, it's actually account usage. And we see that the share of adults in developing countries that have made or received digital payments has increased from 35% to 57%. That's a 20% increase since 2014. That's also massive. Now, why is that important? Because we also know that that is actually a pathway to real financial inclusion, and that's in part by the data trail that is being generated from the usage of these accounts. And we have data, again, on this, about 2/3 of digital payment recipients actually used their digital account, whether on their cell phone or otherwise, for cash management, little by little, week by week, but that really can be a life changer for them. We also know that 40% have received credit and 40% have saved on these accounts. Now, what I want to highlight in this, I think that's massive. I think that's a celebration as an industry we need to recognize. There's a lot of challenges that we're going to talk about in this session, I'm sure, but fundamentally we can be proud of that. And in addition, it gives us what I've been calling a proof of concept, which also is massively important, because in the past, I think we were never sure about how we could get progress in financial inclusion at scale. And I think this is progress at scale. This is millions and millions of, hundreds of millions of people. And we know that it comes fundamentally from connectivity, ownership of cell phones, digitalization of payments, government payments, utility payments, etc. But also KICO, cash-in, cash-out facilities. You can't just digitalize. You still need to face the cash economy that many people still live in. And in a way, a basis of trust through adequate consumer protection. So in a way, we have a path forward for further progress. And I'm saying that because still a lot of countries, for instance, don't have the basic digital infrastructure, have not digitalized most of their public payments, including very large countries with large unbanked population. So I'm very proud, I hope you are very proud of the progress reached and the fact that it has given us a path forward. I just want to add, in case you think, yes, but all of this was made possible by the pandemic or by the microfinance institution like yours that did the work and not by all those of us in this room who are just supporting the sector, I would like to say no, everybody has contributed. It has been made possible, it has been accelerated by the pandemic, but it has been made possible by all the embracement by the sector of the technological advances that underpinned all of this, the support that all of us have brought to the sector, whether it's in terms of investment, in terms of policy support, in terms of advisory support. So I think as a community, I hope we can celebrate that over and over again.
Thank you. Thank you for ending in that good note, celebratory mood. Marc, please, could you give us...
Well, I don't know if we can say we can be happy, but I think we have a chance. When I was here the first time for the first microfinance seminar that took place in Luxembourg was in 1997 at the IEB, not the building we were yesterday, the former building. And at that time, all the people around in the room thought that microfinance would save the world or about, including us. And then, of course, over the years, there have been quite a few criticism, quite a few crises, and we learned quite a lot. And I think that the COVID crisis was a parenthesis for everyone, in everyone's life, in every organization's life, in traveling's life, in everything. So it gave, I think, a chance to kind of get rid of this up and down of the industry and to get time to think and get maturity. And I think it's very important that we have this opportunity now, and I don't know if I would not say that we are... I don't know if we deserve it or if we are responsible for having it, but we have it. So we have this chance to try to capitalize on what we've learned over the last 20 or 30 years, because the years to come are not going to be easy. And so I think that we should really try to take the few months we still have in front of us, because it's probably months, not years, to really try to not remake the same mistake, and to learn from all the mistakes that were made in the past, and to learn from all the exaggeration that we did in the past, in order to help institutions to adjust, to cope with the shocks and the difficulties they're going to face, because they are going to face them, and to protect the customers. So I think that's, I don't know if we have to be proud of this, but I think this is probably what we should have in mind.
It is definitely something to be proud of. Yannick, please, could you tell us what are you most proud of?
This one?
Hope so.
Yeah, so I'm here representing the service providers globally, so I'll try to do my best to give a representation to that. Obviously, from the field perspective, it's been hugely challenging, and I just want to take us all back to the beginning of the pandemic. Of course, we talk about the past 3 years. We're going to talk about the pandemic. There was a lot of uncertainty. We had no idea what this thing was. Everybody was taking decisions on the fly. about how to protect staff, how to protect clients, how to protect families, ourselves. Policymakers were all over the place. Every country was inventing policies that were sometimes good and sometimes absolutely ridiculous. And I'm not going to point to any one particular one. But there was one thing that was constant in all that as a financial service provider was that our frontline staff, our loan officers needed to get the work done. There was, notwithstanding lockdowns and even during lockdowns, there needed to be a way to continue working our support to our borrowers. Stopping operations completely would have a terrible effect on ourselves and on our borrowers. So it could range from a number of things, from the credit bureau rating that they would have if they missed payments. There's nothing in the credit bureau that allowed for a pandemic, allowing you not to pay back your loan. When they lost income, they needed to find ways to diversify their income sources. So we did a lot of lending in that period in order for them to be able to say, okay, my wife who's a garment worker now is not able to do that anymore, let's find other ways to generate income. So loan officers need to do that, always in a relationship base, meaning meeting face-to-face, doing the loan applications, supporting them, understanding what their needs were, and that required a personalized approach. But they were doing that when there was this virus coming out that was deadly, potentially very deadly, potentially not so very deadly. Nobody knew. So people were scared, people were very worried about their families, but they went out and did the work. And I remember, seeing the loan officers during that time, visiting them during the branches, looking, absolutely exhausted, looking, worried, anxious. So what I'm proud of is those guys. So it's to salute them for the work they did in going out and providing services, like frontline workers did in lots of services.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a fantastic reply. Close to my heart as well. Frontline health workers. Right. So I think we're going straight into the poll. And the poll, guess what, asks, whose proud achievements do you agree with most? Those of Yannick, Sophie's, or Marc. You need to take sides. It wasn't going to be easy. So I don't know if it's being launched only online.
Where should we go? Do we need our phone?
Yeah, it's on phone. It's on the app, I think. Yeah.
I only have 4 votes at the moment.
Ooh, the votes are showing. Oh, this is like gambling. It's exciting. I could get used to this.
Yeah, be nice. Just give us 33 but agree. That is the way to do it at the end of a conference. I mean, all friends, happy.
What an audience we have today. Fantastic. Shall we give?
Well, we all got a 9.
I think we
all pass. We all pass.
They all agree with everything.
All right. So we have. Well, votes are moving.
Ooh, the matrix.
We're more or less there. We're a nice audience, and we are moving with our speakers, so not to leave anyone out. So, kind of, you agree with everyone. I'm going to continue, just because we need to go forward, with the second question now. And over the same time period, which were 3 years, what's been your biggest disappointment? What is the thing you're least proud of and that you haven't liked? And I'm going to start with Yannick.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Surprise.
Right. I wrote this one down because I didn't want to get it wrong. It's about political appropriation. So I definitely did not want to wing this one. Right. So I would like to raise it here my disappointment linked to the rhetoric I've been hearing regarding microfinance, and most critically, the appropriation of this narrative within the political space. I am CEO of e-MFP in Cambodia, so examples of this, as you all must know, are rife. My intention here is not to pinpoint to any particular party, but to characterize what this leads to. A short note on my background. I started work in the microfinance sector in the early 2000s in a small Ghanaian town where no such services were offered and with no guidance whatsoever. I was a sociologist with a development studies master's degree, and the little that was being mentioned in the academic space about microfinance at that time was exciting. Unfortunately, that passion for microfinance that led me to provide small loans to women's groups in Ghana, motivated by the same drivers that pushed me to also work in that small Ghanaian town to educate teenage mothers on reproductive health issues, may be lost on today's development worker generation. These will, for many, get to know microfinance by the media publications and, more to the point here, statements from politicians who, for a range of reasons, including, I believe, ideological, have used the microfinance debate as a political tool. For those who know me, they will recognize that I am the first to push all stakeholders to question how we work to support low-income communities. Injecting capital in resource-strained communities is risky, and it is inevitable that this risk will realize. As a sector, we know this, and we work hard to make sure that we mitigate this risk for vulnerable communities, but also allow for and share that risk, because with risk comes change. What I have heard from politicians lately does not echo this. I have heard haunting tales of families' lives destroyed, sometimes willfully by money-hungry managers and loan officers whom we are told care only about their bottom line. And when evidence clearly shows that MFI staff, as reported by borrowers, treat their clients respectfully, because our service to low-income families is one based on trust and long-term relationships, I have heard some chuckle at the idea of evidence-based policymaking. The political appropriation of the microfinance debate is dangerous. It is polarizing, ideological, and I have seen it silence the voices of those it pretends to protect. Let's all work to remind those politicians that consumer protection starts with consumer empowerment.
Thank you very much for bringing up this tricky issue. And yeah, very good reply. Sophie, please, could you tell us what's your biggest disappointment?
So I want to go back to the first plenary session, because for me the biggest disappointment is the elusive progress in closing the gender gap in financial inclusion. And again, you've all heard some of the discussion on day one, but I want to go back to some of the key numbers there. We know from Findex that upon the surface, the gender gap has decreased from 9% in developing countries to 6%. But as we discussed on day one, that's relatively quite an illusion, in that it is very much driven by what happened in India, where the gender gap in account ownership decreased by 17%. And of course, if you multiply by the number of people, that really influences the ratio globally. But we also know that in India it was driven in part not by the numerator, but by the denominator, and it was the elimination of dormant account. We also know that in India, if you look at the gender gap, the evolution of the gender gap in terms of account usage, it's actually increased by 17%. And so really what it means is that in reality, if you were to not look at what happened in India, you wouldn't see a very positive picture. Now, the positive picture tells you that about 250 million new women or new accounts have been opened by women. That's significant. But you still have about 742 million women today that are completely excluded. That's the size of Europe's population, right? So that's really significant. In addition, if you look at the variety of numbers across the world, you will see again that average is just really not representative of the trend globally. And I want to just give a few numbers. If you look at sub-Saharan Africa, and we all care about development in sub-Saharan Africa, the gender gap has actually increased over the same period from 5% in 2011 to 12% in 2021. So we've gone backwards, basically. And there are countries where the gender gap is actually even significantly higher. In Côte d'Ivoire, for instance, it's 27%. In Nigeria, it's 20%. And that's not just limited to Africa. Bangladesh is still at 20%, Pakistan at 15% for South Asia, and even in Latin America, where we've always thought things were moving forward quite nicely, you have a zero gender gap in Brazil or Argentina, or close to zero, but you're also close to 20%, say, in Nicaragua and Honduras. So for me, that's really something as a sector we need to think about very carefully when we celebrate progress in financial inclusion. It's not for everyone yet. And in addition, it's not just about account ownership. As I said, we still have 250 million women, a quarter billion women who have an account but don't use it. And then if we look at the women, so it's a billion in total, right? Those who either don't have an account or have an account but are not using it. And if you look at those who have an account and have received payments on this account, so those that are using it, we also have data that shows that they're not necessarily using it for what really matters in their lives. And for instance, I just want to give you a number. Between 2017 and 2021, the growth in mobile money account ownership and usage was higher among women than men in sub-Saharan Africa. But the percentage of women that use those mobile money accounts for saving merchant payments and utility payments was significantly lower than for men. So that suggests that not only we have less women that have access to an account, less women that use an account than men, but also less women who make actually use of their accounts for really what matters, saving, managing cash flows on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, etc. So I'm actually delighted that we put women financial inclusion as a priority in this forum, that the prize yesterday was focused on that, because I hope that as an industry, we can really focus on that going forward, knowing that it's not going to be easy because it requires intentional attention. I think if there's one message that came from the first session and that we have learned is that it's not going to happen by coincidence. Otherwise, it would already have happened in a different way. It is going to require intentional focus.
Yeah. Thank you, Sophie. This resonates with a lot of the sessions that we had through these 3 days and a lot of the discussions that's been had, so I'm sure that later we can go back to it. Marc, please, what's your biggest disappointment?
As I told you when we prepared the session, I don't feel at ease to say what are the biggest disappointments of the last 3 years, because due to COVID, I've had, as an academic and a researcher, very little opportunities to go in the field over the last 3 years with what happened. So I would like to take a longer perspective and express concerns more than disillusion. And I would say I have, looking with a broader, longer perspective, I have three major concerns. The first one is, and it relates to what I was saying before, is that we were not so good as a field, as a sector, as an industry, to meet the objective that we were given 30 or 40 years ago. We did a lot, but we haven't done, all the discussion we've had is about all the gaps that, Sophie just mentioned a few ones, and there are many others. So I'm concerned that we move from microcredit to microfinance to financial inclusion, now to financial health. And when you look at the excellent presentation that were done this morning to explain exactly what we were talking about, you see that it is a very broad objective and that it includes many things. And my concern with this is that the poorest, and I'm not saying that microfinance is for the poorest of the poor. In this place, everyone understands that this is, it's a past debate. But the question is that to which extent aren't we taking a chance to, in focusing on people who certainly need help, but less and less poor people in society? Because if you take some of the definition that were given this morning about financial health, I'm sorry, but in a relatively well-off country, Belgium, where I come from, most basic workers, like the lady who is at the supermarket, I'm not sure that she is fulfilling the definition that was given this morning. The guy who works for the train company. So as a university professor, I feel certainly in good financial health. Okay, but obviously my salary is a reasonable salary. So I'm a little bit concerned about how we're going to match higher expectation, higher ambition, when we were not so good to fulfill the one we had at the beginning, and who's going to be the loser in this shift? That's my first concern. My second concern is even worse. And again, it's looking backward, and it's because I anticipate that the coming months and years are not going to be easy for the industry, is that the sector as such, and I don't mean here to blame anyone, but I did my PhD in 98, well, presented in 98, on a case, the older in the room will remember, Corpusal Financial in Colombia, which was one of the biggest crises at the time. It was almost bankrupt by the time CGAP was about to publish a note that has disappeared saying, what can we learn from the top 10 institutions in the world? No, it's a joke. But this is just to say, and CGAP was not different from anyone else. It was supposed to be one of the top institutions, and it went into a major crisis. That type of crisis and other around the world, talking this one because this one I knew it very well, have given impression that it was very important to look at regulation and corporate governance. Well, I think that people in charge of regulation have made a lot of progress over the time. A huge work has been done on regulation. But what is the use of a good regulation if you don't have adapted supervision? And I don't think that the effort that was put into regulation, and it was very valid and of good quality in many places, has been followed by a similar or sufficiently similar effort in terms of supervision. In terms of giving the right skill to supervisors, having enough supervisors, identifying exactly who should be supervised and who should not be supervised, and we could keep going just with a whole presentation on this topic. So I think there is a mismatch between the progress that have been made in regulation and the progress that have been made in supervision. Mm-hmm. Many of the worst dictators in the world have wonderful constitution. Okay, so that is a little bit the issue here. So that is a concern on one side, and on the other side also on control, corporate governance on an overall has not improved. I mean, corporate governance, if you look what we really call corporate governance, we are still exactly in the same situation, and it's not typical of microfinance. It's typical of many places, including my university. It's that basically people think as long as the institution is going well, they assume that governance is going well. And then the institution gets into trouble and they say, oh, the governance was wrong. But governance is a preventive mechanism. So when things go wrong, it's not the governance that's going to help. So governance is something to fix ahead of problems. And as I fear that problems are coming, and I have the impression that governance has not been improved enough, I have a second concern there. Mm-hmm. And then I have a third concern, which is more theoretical in a way. With all the gaps that we've been talking, clearly there is a need for innovation. There is a need for trying new products, new schemes, new methodologies, because we won't fill all those gaps just by doing the same, slightly adapted. When you look at the history of microfinance, most of the major methodological innovation were done in NGO, and there is a good reason for that. I mean, cooperative, and with profound, for people who know me, I have a profound respect for cooperative, don't get me wrong. But cooperative by nature, because it's people with their own money, is a conservative institution on average. That's the way it is. Banks and regulated institutions will wait others to have proved that the methodology is efficient to expand it, because they won't take the risk. That's the way it is in most cases. So to really try really innovative things, NGO have been a key players historically. What I'm saying, historically is true. I think, or at least I feel confident to say it's true, and I'm willing to argue the point with example. Let's say it this way, no one knows that he has the truth, but I strongly believe this. Now, most of the development of the sector, of the industry, is done by regulated institution, banking or non-banking financial institution, depending on the country, and I have nothing against this. That is helping massification, this is helping reducing some costs, that is helping to do better what we already know how to do. So I have absolutely nothing against this evolution, but I would like to be sure that first there are still enough NGO in the field, and that those NGO are doing something different from the other players, and that the donors are supporting those NGO to do something different from what the other players are doing, not just another thing of the same. And that is my third concern. So I have plenty of concern, as always.
Thank you, Marc. Very concerned person. Okay, so let's go to our second poll, which, as you would guess, is the same thing. Who do you agree with more? Do you agree with Sophie and the need for a gender gap improvement? Marc, less focus on poverty alleviation, loss of focus on governance and less room for NGOs? Or Yannick, the political appropriation?
You got three, though.
So we're going to have this for each of us?
Yeah.
They didn't tell us they would do this.
Well, they're very much aligned. Oh, the gender gap. Yeah, I guess after all the discussions we've had in this forum.
No doubt it's there.
Nobody Cambodians now. We don't share your problems. Some of them we do, I'd argue, but anyways. Okay.
It's more balanced.
Balanced again? I think we're just looking for a balance in these sessions. I'll just ask the third question because we are running out of time. I'll be a little bit more ruthless with my chairing this time. And I'll start with Marc. And what do you see as the greatest but realistic opportunity for the sector?
I think that the most important, if we want to fill those gaps and if we want to adapt, people are going to live shocks. So it's going to be pressure on them. So we need to do two things, as I've said in a meeting this morning, well, at midday, but I'm repeating for everyone. I think we need, in the products, to make two changes. We have to work more on what I call standardized flexible product, meaning that they have to be standardized or they will be too costly to implement, but they have to have flexibility built in order to just face shocks in a proper way. So we need standardized flexible product. They exist in the industry, but they're not widely spread. So I think we have to put much more emphasis on standardized flexible product, once. And the second thing is, I think we need to work much more on positive incentives. Again, they have been around in the industry in some places. Microfinance, like any banking, I remember a colleague at Harvard who used to say a bank is a bank is a bank, in a way to say it's a credit, it has to be repaid, discipline is important. Of course, discipline is important, but we have been imposing discipline in the sector out of pressure, social pressure mainly. We need to move from there to positive incentives, things reward for having the right behavior. So we have to work more. BRI has been doing it for 30 years. Some other people have been doing. Safe has been doing it in Bangladesh for many years. So there are cases that have been documented on different type of product, on different type of scheme. So I think we need standardized flexible product and positive incentive, and that has to be adapted fast into the product because the people we're working with are going to be in trouble, and we need to be positive.
Thank you very much. I'll go with Yannick next. So, what are your hopes for the European Microfinance Week 2025? What are we going to be discussing?
That's a different question.
It's what? Okay. Looking ahead. Okay. Sorry.
No, I realized that actually my hope was Marc's initial, what you're proud of, which I'm just kind of flipping towards the future. I realized that actually thematically is the same idea in the sense that, and it's a bit of a story from the three things I mentioned. So first, what I'm proud of is really the fact that the staff of microfinance have showed that they're there to bring about positive change in the lives of the borrowers, and I think this crisis revealed it's in a crisis that you reveal the true identity of who you are. And I think it's not, we're not going to say that it was a unanimous across the sector, but we saw a lot of positive signs in terms of that motivation, that commitment to really deal with issues and challenges that the families face. And then on the flip side, what I talked about the challenges was that political appropriation, which is completely disconnected from the way that we lived this crisis and showed, for many of us, again, it's a big basket with a lot of different people in it, but showed that, not understanding that reality on the ground. So, but all of this process, and I think the crises over the years of microfinance and the illusions that were there 20 years ago that excited me as a student 20 years ago, I think there's a reckoning that's happened, and in terms of being a bit more realistic about where we're going and about the risks of working with poor populations. And going back to that discussion about the political appropriation, I had discussions with I'm not going to identify exactly who, but who were saying, why are you lending to poor people? And the poorest of the poor question is resolved. Poor people, and I was saying, well, how can we be asking this question now? 25 years. I'm just, what are we doing here? But I think that, apart from a few misguided people who are not directly influenced, I think there is a reckoning about being more realistic and about, addressing all these challenges in a way that's more pragmatic and that really understands the risks a bit better. So I'm hopeful that we're all getting to that point now. Let's see.
Thank you very much. Sophie, what do you see as the greatest opportunity for the sector?
So I'm going to build a little bit on what was said already. So I agree with Marc that we're going through a period of probably highest difficulties even, globally and for poor people in particular. And so I fully agree that going forward, it's going to be very essential that we use financial services, financial inclusion to build resilience of people. And today, that's just really not the case. Again, I'll refer to Findex, but Findex shows that poor people still don't have the means they need. The financial health discussion confirmed that. And we know that in the absence of the right financial products, they resort to very regressive solutions, which is, I pull my girl out of school, or I limit the quantity of food that I'm eating. So, and we know that financial services, even the very basic, it's not about microcredit necessarily or insurance, even a very basic account allows a poor person to receive a transfer from a friend or a family at the right time. Mozambique during for instance, the floodings were a great example where mobile money transfer peaked, or just savings on a weekly basis and using that at the right time is empowering the poor. So I fully agree with that. But what I really would like to see is not that we change the narrative and that we become less ambitious. I know that's not exactly what was said, but I think it's important that we realize also that the role of financial inclusion is probably more important than ever before. Because of these shocks, because also of the reversals in development gains, the increase in poverty, the lack of progress or reversals of progress on many SDGs, to me means that financial inclusion remains literally an essential ingredient, like a necessary condition. For me, it's the oil on the engine, right? We're not gonna get to our SDG ambition without financial inclusion. So I wouldn't want us to lower our ambition. To the contrary, I'd like us to really think about the outcomes we're trying to influence and go beyond access and usage and really think about building the resilience of the poor, empowering the poor to embracing a more inclusive future, etc. But that requires maintaining, in a way, our eyes on these higher level goals. Now, it's not incompatible with what was said, because I'm very concerned with the Bloomberg articles and so on. So we also need to be very realistic in what can be achieved. But for me, the answer comes more from, understanding what works where, for whom, under what circumstances. Because and also building consumer protection, which you also said. Because for me, the problem is maybe that we have thought about the different segments of populations as a whole, and we now need to really become much more granular and understand that the same services will not work for everybody, that there may be some people who are simply too poor to be served by the private sector, by microfinance institution under some circumstances, and that will need, just more social services. Yeah. There's still financial services for me, because they still come on a cell phone, and they still allow them to save, or at least manage their cash more effectively and more cheaply. But we may need to just be a bit more granular in understanding what works for whom, where, but maintain our eyes on the bigger prize. I think that's fundamental. And then I also agree with everybody who said consumer protection is essential, because part of the problem is that we've allowed cases of problems, and there will always be in the financial industry, but to dominate the conversation, to be politically appropriated. And if we really were to do what you said, to strengthen not just regulation, but also the enforcement of regulation, the supervision and governance, I think we would actually make a step forward in limiting the risk. So stop there.
Thank you very much, Sophie. So we're going to go with our final poll of what of these opportunities you think is going to be more relevant during the next 3 years? So until the European Microfinance Week 2025, guys, what are we going to be discussing? Not following the script, eh?
No, we're not following the script.
Also for the audience online and here in the floor, remember that now we're going to have a discussion, so write your questions for the speakers and also any comments you might have. We have one. Woo! We're all with Sophie this time.
That's because I could take everything.
Now that I've said this, they're going to start balancing.
On average, we all got a third.
Average, yeah.
Come on, give me one.
Come on, guys. One vote for Yannick.
It's a computer bug.
Okay, so let's start with our Q&A. Do we have any, where do we start? Do we start in the room or do we start online? Daniel, give me a sign. Okay.
Okay, so we have a question from Bob Summers. I would appreciate an example or two of standardized flexible products. I think that's for you.
Okay, so 2 examples. I'm not saying that the figures I'm going to give are exactly right, huh? But BRI has had a system where they were paying the interest that are being paid on the loan. If you have been repaying all your installment on time, you are being reimbursed a quarter of the interest that you've been paying on your loan at the end of the system. Now, of course, that means that after having paid a few installments, you get some sort of an incentive to keep paying, because in a way it's like if you were saving, if we may say it this way, because you are paying interest that will be partly reimbursed to you at the end of the loan. That's just one example. Another example from that in BRI, so it's in Indonesia. Another example from Bangladesh, from SafeSafe, is, and I don't know if they still apply it the same way because it has been purchased by BRAC a few years ago, but what they had been put in place is a system where people could reimburse more or less when they wanted, provided that they never had out more than, I think it was the saving, their saving had to be always at least a third of the amount that they were supposed to be reimbursing to the institution. Mm-hmm. So they were taking a loan and they could reimburse more or less when they wanted, and they were saving in the same time, and they had to keep a balance between 1 to 3 between the saving and the amount that they were supposed to reimburse to the institution. It has been documented. If my memory is right, it was named P6 product. Mm-hmm. But I can find, there has been, the reason why I know it is because when we published in 2011, that is to say that it's not new. In 2011, when we published the handbook on microfinance, Stuart Rutherford, who is the guy who invented it, published a chapter on this. So I don't want to make advertising for old book, but there is a chapter in the handbook of microfinance presenting this product. So this is
fantastic. Thank you, Marc. So would you want to jump in into exciting?
Just maybe to add, this Sophie, is not dissimilar to the PAYGO systems that have been, or there's a lot of also very flexible saving schemes where you save when you can. Yes. So I think it goes in the same direction.
Thank you. Yannick, anything exciting you've seen, or you'll pass on this one?
No, I don't think to add. There's lots of examples out there. Those are good.
Fantastic. So, any questions here? In the room? Comments? Anything? We've got a very quiet room. No follow-up? Yeah. Thank you, Antonique. I think there is a mic coming your way. A mic? No, a mic, no?
A very general question maybe, but with all the hopes that we all have, what is the one thing that you think we should be focusing on in order to achieve those hopes? And maybe thinking about all of the people who are in this room. What should we be doing to get to your hopes?
Who wants to jump in? How do we take the opportunities?
I'm happy to start, but
but
I don't have a one thing. I'm gonna just not respect what you're asking, because I think there's actually low-hanging fruits and then more difficult things, and they need to happen, and opportunities, and they need to happen in parallel. So for me, the low-hanging fruits are continuing to support digital public infrastructure development, connectivity, competition in telecom, so we have prices that are much more commensurate to people's needs, digitalization of payments. As I mentioned, this would already go a long way in many countries to continue progress. That's what I call the low-hanging fruit, but that's not sufficient. That would still leave more than 1 billion people outside the system if we think that way. So we need to do more. The second, I'll say 3, if you allow me. The second, I think, is the opportunity that private investments bring. I think we've had a lot of discussions over the period on the importance of socially minded investment, impact investment, and how much they represent as an opportunity, especially in the context where fiscal resources are constrained. And we all fundraising, to the same donors, and we know how difficult it is. And so on the positive side, I'm super grateful to all the private investors who see the necessity for the world actually to get their support, but we need to leverage it. It's an opportunity, but there's a lot of impact washing and a lot of differences between the different types of investment that we need to foster and influence. But also they need an enabling environment. There's still a lot of obstacles that we can contribute to. So that for me is the opportunity. And then maybe the last thing I'll say, which is in relation to what we talked about earlier, there are still very difficult questions to answer, including around what I've called the harder to reach segments, the harder to crack, questions that needs real research, like on women financial inclusion. Despite everything that we've talked about, I actually think we still don't have the answer. We still don't know how to make significant progress everywhere, including in countries where you have social norms that come in the way. And so I think that plus how you handle the smallest informal firms, how you handle youth, how you handle migrants, and all the segments that are people actually, just everyone in fragile context. I think that requires still a lot of thinking and research and exploration, and I think that's also a priority for the sector. It needs to happen now before we progress on everything else, and then we have these excluded segments.
Thank you very much. One more question. One more online question, and then that's it. We have people running away from the room.
Just really one question, and I think this speaks to some number. White wine or red during the cocktails?
Sorry?
White wine or red during the cocktails? That's the question.
Red.
White.
Okay, thank you very much to our speakers. Thank you, Olga, Yannick, Sophie, Marc, for keeping us on our toes all the way to the end and for this fantastic way of wrapping up the European Microfinance Week. Thank you very, very much. Another round of applause, please. And Olga said she had the tough job. It's actually I have the tough job because I'm really the last person between you and the drink. So I will keep it short. But it is my honor and pleasure to, one last time as chairwoman of e-MFP, to wrap up the European Microfinance Week today. It has been such a week, such a great week, so much positive energy, so much enthusiasm. For those of you who are here in Luxembourg, thank you for coming back after 3 years. It was so nice to see everybody. It was great to be here in person and to connect. We had nearly 300 people here after 3 years. But a big thank you also to everybody who joined us online, something that we were able to continue from this terrible COVID time. Also nearly, 250 people online who joined. So this was our first hybrid conference, and I'm glad we were able to do that in order to be as inclusive as possible, more inclusive than we were pre-COVID, right? Now we know it was the first hybrid version, so there were a few kinks in the system and so forth. The team worked extremely hard to make this happen. It's not easy to do something hybrid. So thank you all for your patience when there were a few kinks. Thank you all for participating. It's also harder for everyone else to participate as well, but I think it worked out really well. Provide your feedback, share your comments in the survey that you'll get over email. The team can handle a few
constructive suggestions, but also, we need that also to create the best possible conference for next year. This is an association of members for members, so that's an important piece. This last session really wrapped it up well. Compared to maybe last year, this year's conference was really very much in that tone of the maturity of the sector. We did not really have to, not waste time, but spend too much time on, we should be working in this sector to support women, or why the business case for women, or why climate and environment is relevant in our sector and why we should be doing something. On the contrary, it was very much about capitalizing on that experience, as Marc put it, to get into the how. Let's, get straight to the point, let's leverage all that expertise, let's put it to work, and let's maintain sort of that great action-driven and impact-driven focus of everyone in this room and online in our industry. And that was so obvious in yesterday's plenary around financial inclusion for women, right? We had these superstars of the sector talking about exactly how to implement this, what success looks like, where the challenges are, and it worked so very, very well. Speaking about how, I think one of the topics that was really transversal across many of the sessions, many of the conversations, was very much keeping the client at the heart of what we're doing. Client-centric design, client protection, products that really work for clients, and making sure that we continue in that vein. The other thing, and that's very representative of this group of people, was collaboration to get to the solutions. You could see it also in the room and how people are engaging. And so important for some of the things that you talked about when it comes to the risks of the industries or the challenges that are still coming up. Transparent, open collaboration in order to address some of those challenges together, whatever they may be. And there were a few, and we certainly have some work ahead of us as well. So the agenda for next year's conference is set. Thank you very much. And again, congratulations to Bancofi for winning the award last night. Wonderful to see their work, but also the work of course, the other two finalists, Bancomia and Cash Foundation, and the semifinalists, the 10, and all those who applied for the award. Huge number of applications, 88, I think it was. Very significant work that's being done, and congratulations to all. And such a good representation of how the solution to serve more clients, female clients, is also within our organizations, empowering women in financial services at all levels, at the loan officer, but all the way up to governance, board leadership as well. So I'm excited about next year's topic, food security and resilience. COVID was less a focus this year, right? But nevertheless, the impact of COVID, the impact of existing challenges, climate and newer challenges, Ukraine, et cetera, are being felt very dramatically amongst the people we aim to serve. And so putting more focus on that topic through this award will be a very valuable time and energy for the industry. And I encourage you to start thinking about applications and partners to suggest and so forth. And so one final thing is, of course, to thank everyone. First of all, the Luxembourg Ministry of Foreign and European Affairs, the Directorate of Development Cooperation, the Luxembourg Ministry of Finance for their continuing support of the week, of the sector, and of the European Microfinance Platform. A very warm thank you to them. Our sponsors, they're all here. Thank you all. These conferences could not happen without you. Thank you to Charles Mace and Good Vibes and all of the team there, sitting in the back. Charles, especially because this is week 2 of fatherhood for him, so spending as much time with us. As he did in such a complex hybrid setup is much appreciated. Thank you to the staff of the Labie, always showing up in style and with excellence for this event. To all of our speakers, these 4, but all of you throughout the week, online, in person, thank you very, very much to all of the participants, all the guests, as well to my fellow board members as well, who've been participating in the prep for this and who've shown up as well. And then, of course, the fantastic team at e-MFP, at the Secretariat, not the famous 5 or the secret 7, but the excellent 8 is what it had to be now. A team of 8 fantastic people. So very well done to all of you. On your way out, hand in your badge. It's going to be recycled or reused, so don't forget to do that. And only then do you get a glass of red, white, or something else. Join us for that drink. Travel safe, and see you next year. Thank you all.